Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, cranking out a bare minimum quota of 7 songs per week, or else a scrappy upstart, penning a single song per year that you are quite sure is your magnum opus, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the first Friday of July 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Leonard who drove a Mitsubishi Galant with a No Doubt bumper sticker, and who was always trying to sell you dog-eared paperback copies of the book Ishmael. And old Leonard would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music, and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on YouTube for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there on Sunday nights, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. It's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you for everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. And if you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, it's totally understandable. There's still a couple ways that you can help out the show entirely for free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, say something nice about the show, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. Text them a link to an episode that you dig in particular. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Donovan Woods. Our guest this week is a Juno Award-winning songwriter who hails from Ontario. Donovan Woods got his start in the Wild West music days between Napster and Spotify, when operating as a DIYer was practically required. He has continued with the independent sensibility ever since, continuing to release records on his own label and very wisely retaining the ownership of his own masters. His songs have been widely covered by American country music artists such as Tim McGraw and Lady A lead singer Charles Kelly. His songs have appeared on television shows on ABC, HBO, and the WB. His 2016 album, Hard Settle Ain't Troubled, was longlisted for the prestigious Polaris Music Prize. His 2019 album, Both Ways, won the Juno Award for Contemporary Roots Music Album. American Songwriter says that he is known for his curiosity about the human condition. He writes with a subtle ache about the small, impressionable moments. Pop Matters calls him an extraordinary songwriter who captures everyday life. And Forbes magazine describes his music as powerful, heartfelt, and thought-provoking. I got a chance to catch up with him on the phone a few weeks ago and hear about his journey so far. Donovan Woods, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You grew up in Ontario. What did music look like in your household growing up?
It was my parents loving music, like everybody's parents did. I always think it's like everybody said when I was a kid, I loved music. Every kid, I know from my kids, every kid loves music, like everybody. Yeah.
How old are your kids?
I have like a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Yeah. It's crazy how quickly at like 6 months old, they dive right into it.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And it's really sort of like just a reminder of how human a thing it is and how it's never going away and how... So I was like that too. My mom was a singer when she was a kid. She had like a group that sang, I want to say gospel, but it's not gospel. It was just like hymns, church hymns. And they made a record, they were called the Starlight Singers. And,
oh, wow.
But then, that was just when she was in her teen years. She went on, didn't pursue it or anything. And my dad is a big music fan. We listened to what... My dad is unique in that he wasn't sort of... I remember when I was a teen and I was like, were you into Pink Floyd? And he was like, no, that's not my thing, And I was like, were you into the Beatles? And he was like, that's kids' music. He was sort of like... He was a folkie to the end. He loved... I'm named after Donovan Leitch, the Mellow Yellow songwriter fella. So that's what my dad was into. So he was still folky when I was a kid. He was listening to Arlo Guthrie, and he was listening to Paul Simon. These types of things.
It's funny. Back then, there was kind of like now, people who are really into their music, you'd call them like a jazz jock or something like that. People who are really into a specific type. But it used to be like that with folkies. It's not so much like that anymore. I don't feel like with folk music people, but like your old man's generation, that definitely was a thing where like you wouldn't listen to stuff that was more poppy or mainstream.
Oh, that's right. It was an identity. And I think he still has that sort of like, he's dismissive of those things that sort of define his generation to outsiders. He's kind of like, yeah, Beatles is kids' music, like that, that type of thinking is, and he is a real folk purist,
It's a pretty strong take that Beatles is kids' music. It's so strong, you almost have to respect it.
Almost.
When did you start finding music that was your own, that wouldn't kind of attach to your folks? It kind of came from outside the house, and what was that?
It was hip hop. It was R&B and hip hop music was the first music I loved. I grew up right at the bottom of the province, like really right on the border in a border city called Sarnia. The radio stations we got were Detroit.
Oh, okay.
First things that I heard were the cool radio station in Detroit was I want to remember the call sign. I think it's BX96 or something like that.
Okay.
It was like Belle Biv DeVoe. They were playing Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe and Another Bad Creation and that Boys to Men and that R&B stuff. That was the first sort of music that I gravitated to outside of what was being shown to me by my parents. And then it was Michael Jackson, Dangerous. It really was like that. That was what I was hearing and what I was. First thing I loved was Belle Biv DeVoe. That was my first favorite thing.
Yeah.
and then like as I got older, I investigated. You know, of course, then Nirvana happened and obliterated everything that ever
Yeah.
occurred before, and then all we wanted to do was play guitars. Everybody, you know. So that was sort of the journey.
That was same with me with Nirvana. It's interesting to me though to think of you there in Southern Ontario getting this station from Detroit.
Yeah.
You're kind of getting like this very like, it's not like a regional flavor in that the music was from there, but that's the music that was being chosen in Detroit to be broadcast. And it's like, that's not available. That sort of regionalism isn't available for your kids, for my kids anymore. Everything is internet culture, which is national and international. But you were really kind of getting a kind of idiosyncratic slice of American culture there.
And that is sort of, I mean, that is that sort of narrative of, you know, I can't remember who it was, Marty Stewart, all those old country guys who always talk about the radio stations that reach them, you know, where they were, where they grew up. They know the exact reach of those radio stations. And in some cases, in interviews, I've heard them talk about like knowing the bandwidth of certain stations and understanding why those stations reached them when they were a kid. And, you know, those stations that played the Grand Ole Opry for those guys and things like that, that like, you know, that they were like, if a guy didn't invest his money to build a really big aerial, I would have never heard that, and I would not be a musician. You know, I think is the like logical extension of what they're trying to say in that story, just how sort of happenstance everything is. And I think that sort of weird serendipitousness of American music culture is like, there's something incredibly beautiful about it. And maybe that was me, you know, that's the tail end of it probably where I had it. I mean, that probably wasn't, I mean, certainly by the time I was in high school, that's not how we were discovering music, you know.
No, because even MTV, right before internet culture, that was the beginning of like monoculture.
Yes.
But then, you know, the internet just took it completely to complete ubiquity. What do you, when did music go from something that you were a listener of to something that you were a participant in, that something that you were creating?
My mom had a guitar because she sort of played guitar when she was in her, you know, teens and 20s. So there was like a Yamaha gut string guitar in our house, which I had taken all the strings off and I was using as a G.I. Joe boat for an amount of time. And then my sister, who is 2 years older than me and really helpful to me in many ways, was like, you should figure out how to play the guitar. She's gay and she knows how to impress girls really a lot, and she knew that even when she was like 14, you know. And so she was like, you should figure out how to play the guitar, it will really help you. And I took it to her. I could tell she was serious. And I mean, I loved music, it just had not occurred to me. And then so I did it. We went and had strings put on that guitar again, and then I mean, we had to go to the store and pay the guy to do it at the store, I remember. And then I started taking lessons and figured out, and immediately I wrote. I didn't have any sort of, I remember the first lessons was like the guy taught me how to play More Than Words by Extreme. I learned how to play Come As You Are, you know what I mean, those songs that we learned to play on the guitar. And once I had those, like I would go and impress my friends with those. But then soon after, as soon as I knew all the chords, I just started writing. It was just, I don't know what, I just did, you know what I mean? I didn't have any dreams of being, that's just what made the most sense to me was like, oh, I should try to figure out how to write songs.
And there is like a complete disconnect between like having some sort of facility with an instrument. Like I feel like learning how to write songs and create things that are your own, it's a totally different muscle in your head than, all right, I'm going to learn how to play, you know, this Rush song note for note. Like it is like a different job almost.
I had a lot of friends who were into guitar and guitar culture in the way, which is like get Guitar Magazine and get the tab of what, you know, like the Megadeth tab or like whatever came out in Guitar Magazine, and like learn it note for note.
Yeah.
And that was like, and I always felt sort of strange because that didn't interest me. And all the guys that were into guitar, they were better than me at the guitar. And they still are better than me at the guitar. But like that sort of technical facility or knowing how to play something note for note or copying a lick exactly the way it is it never appealed to me. I don't know what it was. It was sort of, it felt almost like the jockey way to get into guitar to me. It felt like it was like a physical feat rather than like a cerebral. I was always like a poetry writing kid. I was just, you know, dreamy and sweet. So I didn't gravitate to guitar as competition, you know what I mean?
That's a funny way to think of it. It is like a physical feat. It is like watch me throw this football to the corner of the end zone in the perfect place so someone can grab it. Same
It
thing.
definitely is. It's like it's athleticism for kids that are introverts essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like watching both things. I like watching someone throw a football to the corner of the end zone, and I like watching someone play guitar. But it's I'm kind of the same way. It's never what I was going to excel at.
Yeah, me neither.
Um,
I think I don't like guitar shredding until I see it in person, and I am reminded that it's maybe it's one of the peaks of human experience. If you can do that, that's rarefied air.
oh, really? Really,
Yeah.
really. So you get out of high school, then you start playing. You start your career in kind of the mid-aughts, which is the mid-2000s, which is this strange no man's land between Napster has already started, Spotify isn't here yet. How did you get your career off the ground at that time? Because I feel like it was a real free for all in that 7 to 8 years.
Yeah, it was. It was like sort of. I mean, it was that weird year. I think you and I are the same. I think I looked it up long ago. I think we're the same age.
I got started right around the same time, like 2007, 8, 9. Right in there.
That was like. I mean, it was that time when I was in university. I remember we all couldn't believe that we could get MP3s and download we all had every song we ever wanted. We had these huge libraries of folders of illegal music that was on like the like file sharing server at the university, and just like we could not fucking believe that we had all these songs. I remember like we had all these, there was like Weezer demos and stuff. We were just like, and we're playing them on Winamp. It was like a time that like, it was, it was such an odd time for music because it suddenly was valueless. And it was like, we hadn't adjusted to that. We're the generation where we got to experience how expensive it was. I remember when like a double CD was like $38.99. You know what I mean? Like
in $1998.
Yeah, man. I remember Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness was $29.99. Remember that? Like, and it was like I don't think I could afford to get this CD. Like,
no.
So, and then suddenly it was all on a computer. It was just so mind-boggling. And I was like, I had a MySpace and I had all that stuff. And the way that the first momentum that I got was very much of that time. It was with a blog. Blogs started to exist because they could post music really easily in a way that you couldn't really on the internet before. It just didn't really exist.
Right.
And there's a blog that, the title of it was I Guess I'm Floating. That was called the blog. And it was that's what the blog was called. And it was sort of like gathering some popularity in the Midwest, like in Chicago. And I still have fans in Wisconsin that sort of clued into my music. And they posted my whole EP, just like took it and posted up there for free. And everybody could have it. And then that sort of, like a music supervisor heard it and gave me a couple of syncs from that. And it was the first time I went, oh, okay, it was the first feedback I ever got where I was like, oh, people may enjoy this, and it was hugely important,
It's weird because you're talking about there's a good side and a bad side to that music becoming valueless. Because like in one sense, I guess it was kind of a bummer that someone could post your entire EP that you spent making, they didn't have to pay for it. But then there you go, a couple syncs with CBS or Warner Brothers later, and it's like, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad thing.
Maybe it wasn't. I mean, it was sort of the real precipice of that sort of question of whether it was okay that my music was suddenly free. I mean, to be perfectly honest, we stole the recording time to make the EP.
Well, then there you go.
I had a friend who was an intern in a recording studio, and we would just fake setting the alarm and go in from midnight till 4 a.m. and make it. So it felt like giving it away for free was probably the right karmic thing to have happen.
I made my first record in exactly the same way, and I think over the years maybe I have been disingenuously outraged that people stole the music at first. But do you remember you talked about being in college and all of us having this music on our hard drives all of a sudden? You remember there was this period of time when like the recording industry or the Recording Music Association, like one of the techniques that they tried was to make scapegoats of like several kids, and they brought like huge federal charges against 6 kids.
Yeah, against like 17-year-old kids. And they were like, well, these, they had a big, I remember the like news articles about it, and then being like, oh God. but we all had that, like this, and they were like, "This is what they had on their hard drive," and we're like, "We got twice that." Like, yeah, it was terrifying. It was like, I mean, it sort of was unbelievable that you were ever going to get caught for it, but I mean, I guess that possibility loomed.
Yes. And it's important to remember that, because I feel like there's still a lot of musicians that they hem and haw about Spotify. And first of all, I don't have a problem with Spotify because I own my masters and I get a check from them every month. So for me, and I know you're the same.
I know.
But even that being said, it's like, look, what was the situation on the ground before Spotify existed? There was a huge problem, and it was a problem to a point where people would just download this music. It was so bad that, like, the music industry was suing its own customers. I mean, like,
that's right. Yeah,
it's insane.
And I remember the first shows I played in Toronto, people came to me and had me autograph burned CDs.
Right.
So that's where we were at. They burnt their own CDs and they had me come in, and then they brought them in. And I remember being like, well, this is not, like, I never sold physical CDs. I printed them and we sent them off to college radio and stuff, but I never sold those. I missed it. Like,
yes.
By the time I had any momentum, those things were valueless. And like, so I don't have, like, and I feel guilty about it. I don't have that derision that people have for streaming music, because I love it. I love the how much I understand the business. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I love the, like, transparency that I have that I never had when I was with an indie label and I was in my 20s. Like, I had to sue them to get reporting. To be able to look at the back end of my distributor website and understand exactly where everything's going is like,
right.
I mean, I really do like it. I understand there are some huge problems, particularly, of course, in songwriter payments, and that sort of world is, like,
yes,
seemingly being the scapegoat of the industry and being phased out of the industry for the benefit of labels, which is like,
yeah.
But it's an interesting problem because those labels own those publishing companies. So there's, like, it's a much, I'm not saying it's a problem that can't be solved. It ought to be solved, but in terms of, if you're an artist that owns your own masters, it's really hard to hate it too intensely.
Yeah, I just don't get it. And if you own your own masters, it's like, and you're selling other stuff. Like, I sell, the only other thing that people buy from me is vinyl, and it's great, and I make money off it. But guess what? I have to cut a fat check every time I want a run of vinyl, right? And with streaming, there's no cost of goods sold, right? Like, I upload the WAV file and it sits there in perpetuity. So
when people go, I wish I had all your records on vinyl, and you're like, I got to front. You know how much it's going to cost me? $17,000 to, like, float that. And if I don't have a tour coming up where I'm going to sell that, like,
I know.
Plus, we had to do it if we wanted it. We had to do it now. We would have had to do it a year and a half ago to get it now. Like, it's like. The vinyl revolution is like, I mean, you love it. It seems like such a wonderful renaissance until you carry a box of it across Europe, and then you're not so keen on the vinyl renaissance.
No. No. Or I mean, you put an order. I put an order in for some, like, last September. It was supposed to ship today, and I got a message yesterday that said, "Oh, hey, there's supply chain problems." It's like, you know what, man? This has been in your queue for 11 months. So.
Oh, that's wild, right?
Yeah, but there's no supply chain problems with Spotify and getting it there. Yeah. I do suppose, like you said, the major problem is for people who would traditionally make all their money from publishing and who would see, like, mechanical royalties if it was pressed or if it was being played on terrestrial radio, they could make a living. They're screwed right now.
Yes, they're in a spot where they're going to not exist right now if it continues the way it is. And I think, but that also began even with the advent of iTunes, wherein, like, you could, you know what I mean, when Faith Hill had a hit song, her record sold, the whole record sold. Cut on that record. If you wrote track 9 and track 11, you were making, money on mechanicals if you were part of a hit record. And then when iTunes started, you could just get the song. You didn't have to buy the record. And then that sort of phase. So that began many years ago. That sort of change in the industry for that. But now, as it is now, it's unsustainable for people who are just songwriters,
Yes, yeah. And that's a very prescient point you make there. And part of me feels bad for those songwriters that had track 9 and 10 cuts. But then part of me who's a consumer of music as well, it's like, well, this is better for the consumer. Like, it was kind of a screwy deal that they had to buy 9 songs that they didn't want to get the one that they did.
That's right. And I mean, it's an interesting conversation. That certainly, I mean, I certainly am of the generation that was raised in iTunes and never really, I remember buying full records when I was a kid, but the sort of romance for a full album, I don't really have it as much as people who are maybe older than me do, you know?
Getting better at your instrument is an essential part of being a songwriter. When you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. How do you do that, though? Sure, you could get lessons from the neighbor who majored in Bach sonatas on a jaw harp at Brown University, but that'll cost you an arm and a leg. Or else you could pull up YouTube and pay nothing at all, but that becomes the ultimate time suck. You'll just end up sifting through videos of nerds unironically weeping as they plug their guitar into 2 perfectly timed delay pedals that cancel each other out so that they're just listening to the sound of silence. What's the sweet spot in between those 2 options? Peghead Nation, the online home for American roots music. They feature curated video workshops with world-class instructors on guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, upright bass, dobro, and ukulele. They have levels of instruction that meet the needs of both scrappy upstarts and grizzled veterans. And most importantly, all of it comes in at a low monthly subscription that actual strapped-for-cash songwriters can easily afford. To start taking classes yourself, head on over to pegheadnation.com to check out their 50 available courses. Enter the promo code TWS to get your first month free. You can also send a gift subscription to the songwriter in your life or to the player in your band who needs a not-so-subtle hint about their playing prowess. Peghead Nation, when you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. Donovan has always remained proudly independent, and 15 years into his career, it's clear that that decision served him well. But when you're first starting out, sometimes independence can seem like the most terrifying route. You want a label or an agent or a publicist to tell you that they know exactly how things work, and if you'll just follow a simple list of actions, you'll end up playing encores at Madison Square Garden before you know it. Music and entertainment simply doesn't operate that predictably, though. So, independence might work best for many songwriters. You're going to make mistakes, but it stings less when you look back and realize they were your own mistakes and not someone else's. This makes me think of a wonderful poem by the poet William Stafford. It's entitled, "For My Young Friends Who Are Afraid." There is a country to cross you will find in the corner of your eye, in the quick slip of your foot, air far down, a snap that might have caught. And maybe for you, for me, a high, passing voice that finds its way by being afraid. That country is there for us, carried as it is crossed. What you fear will not go away. It will take you into yourself and bless you and keep you. That's the world, and we all live there. So, I mean, you mentioned Faith Hill there. In my mind, with your career, a very pivotal part of your career is when Tim McGraw picks up and cuts Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
When did that happen in your arc, and did that make a huge difference for you, or on the outside looking in, was it did it seem like a bigger deal than it was for you on the ground?
Yeah, like I mean that happened. I had like enough of an artist career going in Canada where people would come see me and such, and then a guy the guy his name's Murphy Carges. He was a bass player in the band Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
Was starting a publishing company with the football player Aaron Rodgers, actually, and the company is since defunct. He called me and said, "Would you want to come to Nashville?" Aaron Rodgers wanted to be involved in publishing. They asked me to. I felt like I was getting scammed. I was at my day job, and he emailed me. I was like, "They're like, we want to fly you to Nashville to meet with us." And I went and I met with them, and they.
Wait, Aaron Rodgers was at the meeting?
No, I met Aaron Rodgers only once later. It was just a bass player from Sugar Ray and an executive that he was working with, a guy by the name of Paul Pontius, who's still a close friend of mine, has helped me out a lot. I went to Nashville. They introduced me to a friend of theirs in publishing, is a guy by the name of Steve Markland, who worked at Warner Chappell at the time. And Steve was kind enough, knew those guys, and set me up with a couple of co-writes. And I had never done a co-write before. I'd never co-written. I would have been like 23 or 24 or thereabouts. Wow. And I had only just written alone. And I wrote a couple songs. I wrote with a guy named Marcus Humman, who I am still such a big fan of, such an admirable writer. He wrote a lot of those Dixie Chicks hits. Mm. Now he's writing a musical about Frederick Douglass. He's an unbelievably talented person. And I wrote with him, and then I wrote with this guy named Abe Staklasa, and he and I wrote, and I remember when they sent me his demo, I thought he was like a 50-year-old man, but when I met him, he was just a kid. He just has a weird voice. and the first time we wrote, the first time I went to Nashville, I wrote that Portland, Maine song in a room with him, with a guy I'd never met before. And I remember going to the airport after that and being like, I think this is the best song I've ever written. And then 2 days later, somebody had sent it to Tim McGraw, and he said he was going to do it, which made me seem like the greatest. I mean, I was like, well, this is easy. I'm going to be a millionaire. I don't have jet skis. And I felt like this is, I didn't know how easy this was the way I felt. And then, it took him a long time to do it, and then he did it. And then it sort of, monetarily, it seemed like I was, I think it was never a single. It was like, it didn't make me a lot of money. But what it did was, make me legit to publishing companies, and they believed that I could do it again. And I did do it again a couple times afterwards, but it has not been as easy as it was that first time, I'll tell you.
I don't know what it is about someone in their 20s, but I remember for me, it was when I first started playing live, I had this great agency. They booked me at all these awesome festivals. And so over the course of like a year, I played all these awesome festivals. And I remember thinking the same thing to myself at the time. I'm like, I'm about to be fucking rich, man. I might as well just go put the down payment on the house in Bel Air now because but the folly of youth. What did you take away from, you were saying that that's the first time that you'd ever co-written. Like, what did you take away from that experience creatively? Have you taken away stuff that you continue to use now? Did it change you in a creative way?
I love to co-write. I really have a fun time doing it. I love chatting. I love that. I love just sitting in a room and chatting and figuring it out. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love writing alone still, but I didn't really understand. I didn't understand it. It seemed so strange to me because up to that point, songwriting had been such a personal thing. It was about me. It was about it was about my own heartbreak, basically, so, but then I sort of understood, I just understood that what it made me understand was that, like, I really love people who write songs, that's the thing I'm reminded of again and again when I write with people. Sometimes we don't click, sometimes we don't, but I love people who are interested in writing songs. I get along with them so well. Yeah. They're the greatest. They're funny. They're the greatest, They're my favorite type of people. And to spend time trying to figure out a puzzle like that with somebody is a real joy if you have two like-minded people who are as invested in figuring out that puzzle as you are,
It is.
I really enjoyed it. Right from the beginning, I really enjoyed it.
It is a strange breed of people because no one's smart enough to actually write a novel, but they're smart enough. Yeah. Smart enough to do this one thing, and they're usually a lot more fun.
I know novelists I say that to, and they go, "Oh, I could never write." Like everybody thinks everybody. I think of writing a novel as the highest artistic. I do think of I don't think I could ever do it, but I'm sure that everybody thinks that novelists want to be rock stars too.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier though. So that's what. So what is these days when you're writing? What does your creative process look like? Like, how often are you writing? Are you writing for your own records primarily? Are you still co-writing for other people? Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
I always thought that it would be two things. Like I was obsessed with the idea that I would, I would always write my music for my records, and then I would go to Nashville and do that thing where I write country songs for other people. And I learned pretty quickly that it was all one thing, and I learned that just by. I remember when we wrote that Portland, Maine song that Tim did. My feeling at the airport when I was listening to the voice memo of it was not like, "Wow, somebody's going to record this." I was like, I don't care what happens to this. I mean, I'm going to sing this until I'm dead. I love it. Like that feeling is the feeling of writing a great song. It doesn't change. It's not different. The songs that other people want that I write, they're the ones that I want. I have so many friends that know that I have written songs for other people who say, I have a lot of songs that I've written that I don't like. How could I send them out? Should I send them out to celebrities? And you're like, well, if you don't like them, I can't imagine that Keith Urban is going to like it. It's the ones that you love. It's the ones that you think, like, the last thing I want is for someone to take this from me. Those are the ones that people want, sadly. And I think of it all as one thing now. So when I'm in Nashville, I'm writing for my record. I'm writing for other people. I'm just trying to write a really good thing as hard as I can, and
How often do you get into Nashville, and how long do you stay for? You going for a weekend a couple times a year, or do you go more often than that?
I used to do a week a month before all the pandemic stuff. I used to do
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And now I'm there at the end of this month for a week. I try to do like my touring. I mean, I thought I would always be a songwriter. I thought I would be just a songwriter because I thought you had to be like a real dreamboat to be a musician. So I never planned on being a musician, but I get to tour quite a bit now, more than I anticipated I would. So it's harder to get there than it is. But I try to do a week every couple of months at least. Yeah.
That's a nice balance, man, because touring is really fun, but if you're completely reliant on it for cash, just like anything else, it can turn into a bummer really quick. So it's nice to have those two things to bounce off one another.
Oh, I was really grateful for it in the pandemic too, because I just could write.
Yeah.
I wrote on Zoom. I could just write. It feels like I have two jobs almost. I feel really lucky. And also I don't ever go out of, I have musician friends who are like, I'm going into a writing period, and
Right.
I think the pressure of moving into a writing period would be a real bummer for me. I think I'm always sort of trying to gather up songs. I never stop,
Yeah.
It feels like a job.
I'm always writing. I'm just moving in and out of drinking periods is usually my vibe, man.
That's right.
I think you've also structured your business in a way that is really, I mean, I think if anyone was starting out right now, the thing to tell them to do would be you want to own your masters, and then you want to be co-publishing with somebody else, right? That's like where we are. And that's really the way that you have set up your whole situation. What made you want to own your own label and release your own music in that way?
I had like an early experience with an indie label in Canada where I couldn't get, I mentioned I couldn't get reporting. I just had no idea what was going on. And they had sort of given me an advance, and then to them that was sort of the end of the relationship. It was sort of, how it is. It's just opaque after that. There was nothing. And I was so irritated by that because I grew up with an entrepreneurial dad. My dad ran a construction company. And I just like, I was interested in the income and outcome, like I was interested in it, especially when, on iTunes, when things happened on iTunes, those things started to be a little bit more transparent. There was like, and there was SoundCloud. You could see how many plays happened on SoundCloud. That stuff started to exist. The front end information existed, so I always wanted to see the back end information. I think that experience traumatized me enough. I think a lot of people have their traumatizing experiences with a major label. I was lucky enough to never have a major label because I think you get caught in that. You got to sue your way out of it. This was an indie label that I could at least just say, hey, can you leave me alone? Can we stop knowing each other? And to their credit, they let me do it. They let me leave. And so I think that was part of it. And we had, there's been interest. I've had meetings with major labels and indie labels, and it just never seemed to me to be enough to want to give up the control of masters, and I think it's a bit delusional. I think and I think also. I listened to the episode that you did with Wade Bowen just this morning, just to be reminded of how the podcast. And Wade Bowen saying, like, when you're in a major label, there's no ceiling. And I feel like, I do feel like I've come to terms with the ceiling that you can get with an indie label. If you're running your own label, there's like a ceiling, but it's like it feels right for me. And I feel like, the age that I'm at, I don't think I'm going to be rocketing to fame in an arena sense at any time. I understand what the product is. So I think the control and being able to do whatever I want was always the most appealing thing to me. And also, nobody wants to talk to a person from a record label every day. I don't want to do it.
It's crazy. Funny hearing you say that. I have met several different young people who are getting started out, and they'll be like opening a show or something. And I'll basically say, how did you get here, and, what's going on? And they'll say, well, I put out a record in college on my own onto Spotify, and overnight I ended up with 500,000 monthly listeners. I'm like, wow, okay, that's great. And I'm like, what'd you do next? And they're like, well, then I went and signed with a label. And I really wish that I hadn't done that, because what they didn't realize was they thought the same thing that you and I thought early on, like, wow, man, if it's going this good early on, wait till how bright my future is. But all that ended up happening is these label apparatuses came in, and they attached themselves to like the money funnel that was coming into this young songwriter and started siphoning it off. They gave him nothing else on top of it.
Yeah. And they've bet on an outcome that they think there's momentum behind, and that they haven't. Like, I think that's the thing that, that's the thing that I misunderstood about labels. You still do it all yourself. You still do everything absolutely yourself. It's you, and if you have a manager that you work with, it's you and your manager. What they're doing is making a bet on you, and they're investing in you. And it's an investor. That's all it is. Yes. And the idea that, and of course, like, if things start to swing your way, if suddenly you have all that financial might and all that influence behind you of a major label, if things start to really swing your way and you're aligned with them, the results can be fantastic. You can be world famous, of course.
Sure.
But if it doesn't swing your way at the right time or in the exact right way, or if it doesn't swing your way and there's someone else at the label where it's also swinging their way, there's just so many variables that may not end up in your favor in that equation. And but yeah, like, end of the day, you got to do it all. You're still doing it all yourself. You're still doing everything yourself, And I think the bonus is you get that big advance. You feel like you're free.
Right.
But other than that, there's not totally an advantage. Sorry to cut you off.
No. I see what you mean. And, you mentioned earlier your dad being a contractor growing up. Same deal with my dad. He was a contractor growing up. And I can't believe how similar in some senses what I do for a living is to what he was doing growing up, Like I remember talking to my dad as a kid, and he was down in the basement working. And I said, what's the matter, Dad? Let's go throw the football or something. He said, well, Joe, I'm worried because I know where my money's coming from for the next 6 months. But after that, I have no idea. You know what I mean? And that's always what it feels like a little bit with touring. And, you do have some steady income coming through streaming and other stuff. But at the end of the day, like, stuff could go really sideways in 18 months from now. I don't know. It's not like being a teacher and having a union behind you and, well, they're not going to fire me and I have a pension. Like, it's different, man.
I see why people, I understand why straight jobs exist, and I can understand the appeal to them. Because on a long enough timeline, I'm broke no matter how like, that's, and there are people who have a life where they go, oh, it doesn't, I have a safety net. I don't really have that safety net. I have the masters of my songs. I guess that provides me with some.
Yeah.
Always still like them, I guess. But yeah, it's a risky. My dad. I remember the big lesson that my dad's life and business taught. We're from like a fairly small town. Not small. It's a small city, so it's like 70,000 people. And he ran a construction company there. And he was like I remember, he didn't so much have, direct advice, but I could just tell he was on all these councils and worked with a kinsman. And he was always it was a small well. He wanted to, and you can't piss in it, and you have to make sure that your success doesn't offend anybody, and it can't offend anybody. And that's an interesting way to look at it. It's sort of your success has to be accepted and has to excite everybody, and that's something I'm reminded of all the time. I have a team of people that I work with, of course. We all have to win. Everybody's got to win. And in fact, almost the music industry is small. That you're reminded of that all the time. You run into those same people over and over again. Your success needs to be exciting for everyone. There can't be anybody begrudging it. All the wheels have to be greased. And I do feel that all the time. I feel like everybody has to be a participant in the success for it to feel good and for it to be sustainable. It can't be success at someone else's expense. And I think I picked that up from my dad for sure.
Everybody's got to eat. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's sometimes I ran into a thing touring wise when it's like, okay, I could go to play a show and I could do it solo because of what the songs are. And so, but I would always talk to my agent and I'd be like, well, how come they're willing to pay more for the band? It's the same difference to them, right? That this many people come in, they buy this many beers. And I would gradually learn to find out exactly what you're talking about there. Something just doesn't sit well with a promoter or with anybody else to watch a guy drive up with a rented car, walk in by himself, sell the merch by himself, and walk out with a few $1,000 by himself. Like, people are like, well, what the fuck was that? And maybe they're right,
Yeah, no, maybe they are right. And I do think, I've encountered that same thing, whereas, the band isn't always the most financially viable thing in certain marketplaces. We're just about to go up to play this festival of Folk on the Rocks in Canada, which is in Yellowknife, which is like in the Northwest Territories and way up north. And the band, flying the whole band there is I'm gonna lose money.
Right.
But I think it's really fun for us to all be up there. And I see more. I try to make sure I'm seeing more than just what we're gonna make on a show. That it's important that I go up there and be the big act that I can be. Rather than just go up there and be me going up there and doing them a favor and singing my little songs and leaving with my money. I don't think that's not valuable for everybody. What's valuable is that they get a good show up there, they get a big show, and they want to have me back, and that the band gets paid, and the band gets to go to a fun place that we've never been before. That stuff, like, there's so much more positive outcome from that than me just going up there and making a bit more money. You know what I mean?
Right. But the rest of your business has to be, you have to have your ducks in a row in other places to be able to afford to make that decision.
Yeah, and the reason I can afford to make the decision is because I have money. I make money off of people streaming my music. That's the reason I can be risky in other ways.
Yeah.
Which is like really, really great. I really feel lucky about it.
Yeah. How do you? There's not a ton of musicians that I talk to on here that not only have a family but a bigger family. I have 3 kids as well, and also they don't have young kids. Maybe I'll talk to older artists whose kids are grown. But I don't know of any other artist I've talked to on this show that also has 3 kids under the age of 10. How do you? It's a constant battle for me. I'm always having to let people know before we start working together, I'm going to be a pain in the ass to get a hold of a lot of the time, and I'm going to deliver things late because my main job is civilizing these little brutes right now. How do you make that balance work for you and your family?
I don't. Everybody's always, the pandemic has been really fun to be able to be, I'm sure you feel the same way, to be reliable. When my sister says, can you help me do this next week? And I can go, yeah, it's been very exciting to be a reliable individual for a number of years here in a row. Yeah. My kids and my 2 older kids are with an ex-partner, and my 2 younger kids are with my wife. My wife and I actually just got married on Saturday.
Congratulations, man! That's wonderful.
We have a 3-year-old together, of course, so we're married functionally, but now we're literally married. but everybody, I mean, makes a lot of sacrifices and is very understanding. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, even the kids. I mean, my dad was away a lot. He was at conferences and these types of things. So I don't have that thing that. I mean, I miss them, of course, when I'm away, but I do think that there is like a value in your kids seeing you work and seeing you go out and do the thing that you want to do and take personal risk and achieve your dreams. You know, I think there's value in that. But I do find it. I mean, I don't have any voice memos of songs that don't have kids screaming in the background. I don't have any, like, you know, it's the writing part that is the challenge to figure out. When I am home, it's a challenge to find time to do that. You can't very well, I'm sure you know, you can't say to it's not great to say to your partner, I would like to go to our room and think about my feelings for 2 hours while you sort this chaos out down here. Yeah. You just can't do it. It just doesn't exist in that way anymore. Songwriting becomes a new thing that you sort of steal in between moments.
It does. But, you know, luckily, you know, if you become a parent, not like super early on, and you had your 20s to like really write a bunch, I feel like you don't need as much time as you did like in your early 20s to write, because you've learned stuff at that point. You can make it happen a little bit faster.
I certainly can. And I certainly also know that, like, I know that the heavy lifting is ideas, you know.
Yeah.
It's an idea job. It's a job. I mean, I always think, like, I always try to say to my manager and to my publishers that it's like, it's tough to find a person, you know, when there's a questionable write in the calendar, or you don't know that there's any. Sometimes there's a person that they want you to write with that you go, I don't know that I can offer these people anything. And I think a more valuable use of me is like literally sitting in a room looking at the wall trying to think of something. Like, that's literally a pretty good use for me. And I can come up with ideas that will unfurl into songs. I mean, those things that shit is valuable. You know, just the seed of a song is so valuable. And that's what I sit when I'm with my kids, when I have time to sit around with them. I'm usually just have a guitar in my hand and I'm just noodling and coming up with some idea. And I take those ideas and then when I'm on my own, I can flesh those out. But the hard work is the idea to me, you know. Writing the rest of it is just like time.
Yeah. That's a great place to leave it. It's been a pleasure talking to you, man. Just an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's a joy and it's really nice to meet you. And I've been a fan for many years. And I listen to the show and
right on.
It's
thank
great
you, brother.
So thank you for having me.
Same. I'm a fan here, and I'll keep an eye on your schedule if you're coming through DC.
Is that where you live? You live in DC, do you?
Maryland, right outside of DC.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So, all right, brother. Take it easy, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
Peace. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Donovan Woods' latest album is entitled Without People, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.